Before my story unfolds, let me pose a question. What would you do if the one you cherished most in this world utterly shamed you in front of everyone? What if you sacrificed your own aspirations to build theirs, only to be mocked and cast aside like you were nothing? I remained silent too long, but when I discovered the truth, my whole world changed. Let me tell you how I journeyed from being invisible to unforgettable. Don't forget to subscribe and share in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Henry Carter. I'm a widower, an artist, a grandfather. I never sought a grand life. I never needed one. I lived quietly in a small, unassuming home in Sterling, Virginia. My days were a gentle rhythm of painting, of listening to the wind, and of loving people, mostly Mason. Mason is my grandson. I raised him like a son, truly. My own son, Lucas, had him at 18. He was overwhelmed, working 2 jobs simply to make ends meet. So Mason's childhood unfolded with me, finger painting in the kitchen, his tricycle humming on our cracked driveway, helping me pluck dandelions for bouquets that wilted softly in jelly jars by the window. He used to call me Pop, not Grandpa, not Granddad, simply Pop. When he was little, I was his whole world. Years slipped by. He grew. The world just took over. Tablets replaced the storybooks. Social media erased those kitchen painting sessions, and I simply stood back, filled with pride, yet quietly heartbroken, watching his life become something I hardly recognized. But my love for him never faltered. Not once, and for 12 years I held a secret for him. Every month, I put aside what I could from my fixed income, birthday money, grocery savings, even skipped medications, to build a university fund just for him. I knew he dreamt of Northwood College, the big, shiny, expensive school out in California that all the artistic kids longed for. Tuition was insane, living costs worse, but I believed in his dream more fiercely than he did. Though he had stopped painting years ago, though he never mentioned it anymore, though he rarely visited unless he needed something from me, still, I believed. And for his 18th birthday, I wanted to give him something that was more than money. I wanted to remind him of the boy he once was, and of the bond we used to share. So, I painted a gift for him, not merely a painting, but a memory held fast on canvas. I labored for weeks on it. Every brushstroke was a thrumming heartbeat. I painted the old, weathered swing in our backyard, the one he adored when he was 5, our golden retriever, Max, who we lost when he was 10. The daffodils that bloomed faithfully outside his window every April, a soft, watercolor sky, floated above it all. I wrapped it with care in simple brown craft paper, tying it with a white satin ribbon. I slipped a small card inside that read, "May your future be as bright as the little boy you used to be." I smiled, placing it on the back seat of my car, my heart full, brimming with hope. I pictured his face alight with joy as he opened it. I pictured him embracing me, maybe even shedding a quiet tear. My imagination was wrong. The party was a world away from the birthdays I used to throw for him. You remember, backyard barbecues, cake from scratch, streamers held up with tape, and a whole lot of love. No, this was polished. His father, Lucas, had spared no expense. White linen tables beneath a vast tent, a catered buffet, a DJ. Mason had a table reserved just for his presence, piled high with glossy boxes wrapped in designer paper. Everything shouted money, everything, except for me. I stood there in my old gray sweater, clutching the painting as if it were made of spun glass. No one really seemed to notice my arrival, and that was fine. I was not there for them. Mason wore a slim blue suit and shoes with heels higher than I could ever dream of managing. He glided from table to table, his laughter loud, snapping selfies, flanked by friends who barely gave me a glance. Eventually, Lucas noticed me and managed a strained, polite smile. "Oh, you made it," he said, his tone suggesting I was a distant cousin, not the man who once changed his son's diapers. I offered him the gift with a gentle smile. "Where should I—" "You can just leave it with the rest," he replied, already turning his attention elsewhere, but I held back. An instinct told me to wait. I wanted to give it to Mason myself. I needed to. When he finally began opening the gifts, a crowd gathered, phones were held aloft. recording the moment. He tore through boxes, designer bags, cash cards, AirPods, then he got to mine. I saw him hesitate. My wrapping wasn't high-end. It was simple, made by hand. "Oh, this one's from my pop," he announced, forcing a smile. He tore the paper, opened the box, and lifted the painting. A silence fell. Then the laughter started. "Are you serious?" he asked, holding it up as if it were some kind of punchline. "A painting? That's it? It must have been cheaper than buying a real gift." The kids around him snickered. Someone muttered, "Vintage vibes, I guess." Lucas shot me a quick, pained look, but stayed silent. I stood frozen, my hands hanging empty at my sides. "It's sweet, I guess," Mason added with a dismissive shrug, leaning it against the table leg like discarded scenery. The crowd moved on. No one saw my expression. That's the curse of being invisible. No one ever sees your pain. I turned and walked back to my car, each step dragging the weight of years behind me. Years of birthday cakes, baked in solitude. Years of scraped knees, kissed and made better. Years of whispered prayers over bills so he could have soccer cleats or paint sets or summer camp. I sat in the driver's seat. Door closed. Engine off. I didn't cry out loud. I didn't sob. I just stared at my hands on the steering wheel, watching a single tear fall and land right on my wedding band. It was in that moment I realized something. That painting was the most honest piece of my soul I had to give. And he couldn't see it. None of them could. Not truly, but I would never let myself forget. When I returned home that night, I didn't even flick on the lights. I just walked into the kitchen, placed my briefcase on the counter, and stood there in the encroaching dark. The deep silence of the house enveloped me like a familiar old coat. No laughter, no melody, no voices urging me to smile more. No one asking if I was all right. I opened a cupboard, retrieved a chipped teacup, filled it with water from the tap, and sat at the table where I once helped Mason with homework, where he'd sit cross-legged, hair pulled back, asking me which colors he should use in his drawings. I glanced over to my painting corner. The easel stood stark and bare. The table beside it, a mess of brushes and dried-up paint tubes, lay untouched from the day I'd finished his birthday present. That painting, it had taken me weeks of aching wrists and eyes that blurred with fatigue, weeks of waking in the night because I'd remembered one more small detail to add to the canvas. He called it cheap, and the crowd had laughed along with him. I stared down into my teacup. My own reflection was a faint tremor in the ripple. Then I rose, walked to the hallway, and opened the drawer where I kept the folder, labeled University Fund, Mason. It was a thick folder, overflowing with every document, receipt and statement, from the savings account I'd painstakingly built over 12 long years. Every single deposit, every transfer, every small sacrifice I'd made. I'd skipped buying new clothes. I'd skipped haircuts. I even canceled cable. Each time I put that money away, I whispered to myself, "It will all be worth it. He is worth it." I turned on my old desktop computer, the one I rarely used now, logged into the online banking site, and typed in my password, the same one I'd used since the day I first opened the account for Mason. The balance glowed on the screen. Thousands. I stared at that number for a long, quiet time. I knew the precise cost of every single dollar. Then I clicked transfer. Not to Mason, not to the university fund. To me, to my personal checking account. I watched the progress bar inch forward, as if it were giving me a final chance to reconsider. But I did not. Not this time around. Transfer complete. Balance. 0. I closed the folder, shut the drawer, and turned off the computer. No one had to know about this. Not yet. I wasn't acting out of spite. This wasn't revenge. It was something else entirely. A silent resolution made in the eye of a humiliating storm. For the first time in my life, I was choosing me. Not my son. Not my grandson. Not the idealized image of what a good grandfather was supposed to be. Just me. I made a cup of tea. Properly this time. Warm and laced with honey. I sat in the stillness, sipped it slowly, and let the quiet mend a tiny, fractured piece of my soul. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel enraged. I just felt done. The following morning, I was still uncertain if the events of the night before had truly happened. I shuffled into the kitchen, my slippers whispering against the linoleum, and stared at the computer as if it were a ghost. The bank account was real. The transfer was real. The money was under my name now, no longer his. I expected to feel worse, but I didn't. There was no guilt, just a strange, unfamiliar quiet settled in my chest. It wasn't exactly peace, more like the stark absence of chaos. That same afternoon, a text message arrived. "Hi, Pop. Can I stop by today? Miss you." I gazed at the screen for a long while. He hadn't called me Pop in months, perhaps even longer. I did not reply immediately. 2 hours later, he appeared. Mason, on my porch, holding a tray of cookies from that gourmet bakery downtown. The kind I could never justify buying, but always admired through the window as we walked past. His hair was styled, his clothes were casual, his smile was a little too bright to be genuine. "Pop," he chirped, throwing his arms around me before I had a chance to react. I went rigid. My body remembered the party, his voice echoing in front of his friends, his laughter feeling like shards of cold glass. But I let him hold me. He smelled of expensive cologne and sugar. Nothing like the boy I remembered anymore. "I was just thinking about you," he said, walking into the kitchen as if he still belonged there, as he did when he was small. I wanted to apologize for the party. I was just so overwhelmed. I didn't mean what I said at all. Sat at the table. His hands neatly folded, his nails were immaculate. His phone cast a soft glow in his lap. "I shouldn't have said that about your painting. It was really so sweet of you. It's actually quite beautiful." I nodded slowly, attempting to decipher the look on his face. Was this real? I so wanted it to be real. "I missed you," he added. "I know I haven't been around much. Things just got busy. But I'm here now." He reached for my hand across the table. His eyes glistened as if with unshed tears. "I've been thinking a lot about university," he began softly. "About Northwood College. I know the fund is, complicated now, but I just want to be close to you again. I'm not here for the money, Pop. I swear. I miss us." The words coiled around me like ivy, soft, familiar, and so very dangerous. I felt something inside my chest loosen. Perhaps he was maturing. Perhaps the shame from the party had sparked a change deep inside him. Perhaps I had reacted too harshly. After all, he was young and foolish. "We have all been there. I'll think about things," I told him with a gentle voice. "But I'm glad you're here now." He smiled. The big one, the very same smile from when he was 7, when he would draw me pictures of rainbows and scrawl, "I love you, Pop," in unsteady crayon. We ate the cookies. He stayed for dinner. He even helped me wash the dishes and asked about my current painting. He even brought up some old childhood memories. The swing, Max, the daffodils. My heart started to believe again, to soften its edges. Later that night, I opened the university fund folder once more. I didn't transfer any money, but I considered it. I considered it more than I wanted to admit to myself. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe he had learned a lesson. Or maybe I just craved his love so desperately. I was willing to be mistaken. I did not sleep well that night. His voice kept echoing in my mind. "I'm not here for the money, Pop, I swear." And yet the only thing louder than his words was the echo of that birthday party, that laugh, that cheap, cruel remark. But I forced the doubt down, burying it deep inside, because sometimes you would rather cling to a lie that feels like love than face a truth that leaves you all alone. It was on a Tuesday afternoon that I found out. The sort of day where nothing seems significant enough to command your attention. Overcast, still, ordinary. Mason had come by that morning, bringing his laptop and a bright smile. He claimed he needed assistance printing out a scholarship application. I'd been the designated tech expert in the family since the 90s, even if I could now barely manage to update a phone. He departed after lunch, in a hurry to meet up with friends. I remained in the kitchen, washing the few dishes we had used, humming a quiet tune from an old jazz album we both once adored. I remember the thought crossing my mind. Maybe this is healing. Maybe we are truly rebuilding something important. Then I went into the study. His laptop was still there, open on the desk, humming softly, its screen still aglow. I was just going to close it, simply click it shut, and send him a reminder text. But the screen snagged my attention. A chat window was open, a messaging app I didn't recognize. At the very top, it read Mason chatting with Emmett. My gut screamed at me to look away, but something deeper, more primal, a protective instinct, compelled me to read. The last message struck me like a physical blow. "Don't worry, he's totally falling for it. I've been sweet, cried a bit, told him I missed our bond." Classic emotional bait. He always melts with that family crap. My hand started to tremble. Another message blinked into existence below it, fresh and utterly ruthless. "Just need a couple more visits. He's already thinking about putting the fun back. I know it. Told you. He's predictable. I'll be in Northwood College by fall. Manifesting." I stared at the words on the screen. They weren't just cruel. They were methodical. This was not some mistake. This wasn't a mere slip of the tongue. This was a strategy. Everything. The visits, the hugs, the stories about Max and the daffodils. Every tear, every cookie was part of a script, written to manipulate me. I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been minutes, or it could have been hours. My legs eventually carried me to the sofa, and I sank down slowly, the laptop still open in my lap, the words glaring like cruel neon signs. His voice, his sweetness, every pop. "I missed you" replayed in my head like a scratched record, and each repetition sounded more false than the last. I felt a deep chill, as if someone had extinguished the sun. How had I not seen it? How had I allowed myself to fall for it all over again? I looked at his messages, sprinkled with emojis and exclamation points, as if they weren't even typed by the boy I raised. He sounded like a complete stranger. Worse, a predator, targeting my emotions, manipulating my heart, and wielding love like a weapon. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. Instead, I closed the laptop slowly, like shutting the lid of a casket. The grief was real, but this time it was not grief for a person I had lost. It was for a person who had never truly existed. The version of Mason inside my head, the sweet, inquisitive child with paint smudged on his cheeks, who had once declared I was his very best friend. That boy was gone. Perhaps he had been gone for much longer than I ever realized. I sat in the silence for the remainder of the day, letting the truth sink in. This was not just disappointment. It was betrayal. And it was not accidental. It was intentional. I walked to my painting corner later that evening and pulled the cloth from the canvas he had so publicly mocked at the party. There it was, our history told in brushstrokes. The old swing, the dog, the daffodils, and all I could see now was the word he had used to describe it. Cheap. But for me, it was never about the price. It was about memory, about effort, about love, and I finally understood a profound truth. He hadn't just rejected the painting. He had rejected me. I whispered to the canvas, my voice firm this time. "You're not the one who's worthless, and neither am I." That night, sleep did not come. I did not even try. I just sat in my old rocking chairs in the living room. A blanket draped around my shoulders. The house was dark, save for the faint yellow glow of the porch light filtering through the curtains. It was strange how quiet pain could truly be, how it did not always need to scream. Sometimes it just sits there beside you, breathing in rhythm with you, waiting for you to finally acknowledge its presence. I kept hearing his voice, inside my head, again and again. "He always melts with that family crap." I thought of all the times I had melted, when Lucas would slam doors and call me overbearing. I just let it go. When Mason's visits grew less frequent, I told myself he was just busy with his life. When I was forgotten on holidays, I would bake cookies and drop them off on his doorstep anyway. I melted because my love made me soft. Because I believed in forgiveness, in unwavering loyalty, in second chances. But now, I saw it for what it truly was, survival. I had spent my entire lifetime sacrificing parts of myself just so no one would ever leave me. I gave until I had nothing left to give. And then I gave even more, and for what? So my grandson could laugh about me behind my back, so I could be manipulated, into handing over my life savings like some gullible, lonely old fool. I felt a rage building that night, not a loud, destructive rage. It was a quiet, focused kind of anger, the kind that sharpens your senses, that pulls the wool from your eyes and shows you who you have become, and who you are done being forever. Around 3 a.m., I rose, walked to the painting he had called cheap, and stood before it for a very long time. The memories captured on that canvas no longer stung. They were not bruises anymore. They were evidence. Proof that I had loved, that I had given my absolute best, that I had been real even when they were not. I whispered, "You're not going into a closet, not anymore." And I truly meant it. I turned to my bookshelf, retrieved an old camera I hadn't touched in years, and I took a picture of the painting. Then I sat down at my desk, turned on my computer, and began to type. I found an online community for older male artists, a quiet sanctuary on the internet where people posted their creations, shared their stories, and offered each other encouragement. My fingers trembled slightly, but I uploaded the photograph. In the caption box, I wrote, "This painting was called Cheap by someone I love, but it was painted with everything I had left. Every brush stroke is a memory. Every color, a piece of my heart. Maybe it's not enough for some people, but it was everything to me." I clicked post. I wasn't expecting much. Perhaps a few likes, a kind comment or two, but this was not about seeking attention. It was about finally using my voice, not just my paintbrushes, to speak my own truth. I left the computer on and returned to the living room, made some tea, sat in the stillness, and for the first time in a long, long while, I did not feel invisible. I felt awake. When I woke the next morning, the sun was already streaming through the curtains, casting long golden stripes across the wooden floor. My tea from the previous night sat cold on the end table, completely untouched. I stretched, my body feeling stiff, but strangely revitalized, as if something deep inside me had fundamentally shifted. I shuffled over to the computer, not anticipating much. And then I saw it. The screen was ablaze with notifications, likes, comments, shares. I blinked in disbelief. The painting I had posted, that very painting, had caught fire overnight. It was not just a spark of sympathy. No, people were seeing it, truly seeing it. I clicked on the comments. This brought me to tears. There's so much emotion here. Whoever called this cheap doesn't understand love. Do you sell prints? I need this hanging in my home. Please tell me you're exhibiting your work somewhere. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt flushed, almost dizzy. I scrolled down further. Messages had started to flood in. Direct messages from total strangers, mostly men. Men who were fathers, grandfathers, sons, men who said they recognized themselves in my story, that they'd been told they were too sentimental, too giving, too soft. But this painting, it was a symbol of power, and then one particular message stood out. "Hi, Henry. I'm a curator for a small gallery in Baltimore. Your piece stopped me cold. Would you consider exhibiting it? We would be honored." I read the message 3 times over. Baltimore, a gallery. I looked back at the painting, still leaning quietly against the wall near the dining room, half cloaked in shadow, the swing, the dog, the daffodils, my memories made public, my pain transformed into something beautiful. I replied with trembling hands, yes, I'd be honored too. Within hours, more messages arrived. Art magazines, influencers, a man from a major platform asking if I would be interested in a feature story. It was as if I had tossed a tiny pebble into a still pond and somehow summoned a tidal wave. Later that afternoon, the curator from Baltimore called me. His name was David. He said he wanted to fly in to collect the painting himself. "I want to treat this piece with the care and respect it deserves," he told me. "It's not just art. It's a story that people need to hear," he inquired about the title. I hesitated for a moment. Then I smiled. "Call it The Discarded Treasure." David paused, then replied, "Perfect." After we ended the call, I sat at my kitchen table and let the feeling wash over me. This was not about revenge. It was not even about Mason anymore. It was about me reclaiming the pieces of myself I had given away far too easily. It was about taking what they had dismissed and turning it into something they could never touch. That night, I did not just sleep. I dreamed of vibrant color, of brilliant light, of finally being seen. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the center of a sun-drenched gallery in Baltimore. My hands were shaking as people moved around me, murmuring, studying, and pausing for longer than I ever imagined they would. My painting hung on a pristine white wall, framed elegantly and lit with a soft glow. It looked powerful, not because of its technique or style, but because of the story it held within it. My story, The Discarded Treasure. The placard read, by Henry Carter. I must have stared at that small sign for 5 whole minutes. David, the curator, came to stand beside me. We had over 300 people at the opening, he whispered. It's the most attention we've received all season. I blinked, completely stunned. He smiled. And there's more. He led me to his office in the back. A quiet little room filled with sketches and portfolios. On his desk lay a printed email. A private collector in Manhattan wanted to purchase the piece. For $20,000 cash. I stared at the number. It did not feel real. David observed my expression.
You don't have to sell it,
he said gently. But if you do, this could fund a new studio, travel, materials, whatever you want. You've got something rare, Henry. A voice and a heart. My lips trembled. For so long I had believed my voice was insignificant, that my heart was a liability, that all I was a conduit for other people's dreams. But here, now, my pain had a value. My truth had a worth. I nodded. Tell him yes. We finalized the deal that very day. I signed my first ever artist contract, my hand barely steady enough to hold the pen. David insisted on taking a photograph of me in front of the painting before it was taken from the gallery. Smile like you mean it, he said, and I did. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I truly meant it. Back home in Virginia, things felt different. Lucas called once, completely out of the blue, just to mention he'd heard my painting was getting some attention. No apology, no congratulations, just a detached curiosity. I didn't offer him any details. And then Mason appeared. He hadn't called ahead, just knocked on the door one afternoon with a weary expression and eyes glossed over with tears. I almost didn't open the door, but I did. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped back, letting him inside. We sat at the same kitchen table where he once ate cereal in his pajamas, where I'd once helped him build science fair projects out of cardboard and glue, where he used to tell me I was his favorite person in the entire world. He folded his hands and looked at me with the same face I had watched grow for 18 long years. I saw the painting, he said. Online, people are talking about you, about it. I remained silent. He hesitated. I wanted to say I'm sorry again. I raised my eyebrow. For the birthday party. For that and for everything else. Still, I said nothing. He looked down at his hands. They were fidgeting now. He wasn't crying, just waiting. I messed up, Pop. I was stupid, and I was selfish. I took you for granted, but I want to fix things. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded. What do you mean, fix things? I mean, he swallowed hard. I still want to go to Northwood College, and maybe, if things are different now, maybe you could. And there it was, the truth, bleeding through the thin apology, still chasing after the money, still chasing after me. But this time, I was not chasing back. I stood up. He looked up at me, his expression confused. I did not shout. I did not cry. I simply stated, you called my love cheap. You pretended to care because you thought I would fund your dream again. You treated me like I was a transaction. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. You lost something that day, Mason. Not just the money. You lost the one person who believed in you, no matter what. I walked to the door and opened it. You want something from me again? Earn it. He stood up slowly, his lips pressed into a hard, thin line. His pride wounded. I didn't expect an embrace. I didn't get one. He left without another word. I watched him walk down the porch steps, back to his car, back to whatever narrative he had constructed to convince himself he was entitled to it all. And I went back inside, alone, but finally whole. A week passed after Mason walked out of my house without so much as a goodbye. I didn't hear a word from him. Not one text. Not one call. And you know what? I wasn't expecting to. For the first time in years, the silence didn't ache. It felt clean, like a space being cleared out for something better to grow. Then one morning, as I was sipping coffee on my porch, Lucas appeared. He didn't bother to knock, just barged right in like it was still years ago, and I was watching Mason after daycare. His heels clicked angrily on the wood floors. His suit was immaculate, his blazer stiff, his expression sharp and unforgiving. "I just came from Mason's," he said, skipping any hello. I took another slow sip and waited. "He's crying. He says you humiliated him, that you made him feel like he was trash, that you're throwing him away over a single painting." I said nothing at all. He told me about the money, about the university fund. He said you took it back from him, without any warning. Still, I remained quiet. I let him speak his piece. Lucas threw his hands up in exasperation. "Do you have any idea what you are doing? You are sacrificing his entire future. You're punishing him for being young and stupid, for making one bad joke at a party." At that, I stood up slowly. I walked to the counter, picked up the thick folder labeled University Fund, Mason, and held it up for him to see. "This," I said, my voice calm, "is 12 years of my life. Every coupon I clipped, every doctor's visit I skipped, every winter I kept the heat turned low just to save $50. This folder is my sacrifice." And he spat on it. He was just upset. "No," I interrupted him. "He was cruel, and then he came back and played nice, just to get it back. He didn't apologize. He gave a performance, and I nearly fell for it." Lucas crossed his arms, defiantly. "So what happens now? You just let his dreams fall completely apart?" I looked him straight in the eye. He is not. If his dreams are real, he will fight for them, work for them, not manipulate a man who loves him." Lucas's face flushed with either guilt or anger. I could not tell which. "I raised you better," I said softly. "And I raised him better. But somewhere along the way, you both learned how to take and completely forgot how to give back." Lucas looked away from me. I walked to my desk, pulled out a new folder, and set it down firmly. This one was labeled in fresh, black marker, Fondo de Libertad. Henry Carter. "I'm using the money now, not for anyone else, but for me." He stared at it. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "I gave you both decades of my life," I said. "Now I am taking a few years back for myself." Lucas finally whispered, "You really won't pay for Northwood College?" "No," I said, without a trace of hesitation. "I already paid in full, with everything I had, and you both threw it all away." He left in a stony silence, and I poured myself another cup of coffee. My hands did not shake this time. They say when one door closes, another one opens. But sometimes it isn't about the doors at all. Sometimes it's about the walls crumbling down so you can finally see the sky above you. A few days after Lucas stormed out, I received an email from an editor at the Boston Register. He had read about the gallery exhibition, seen my painting, and wanted to feature me in a piece titled "Second Wind: Men Who Found Their Voice After 60. I had to laugh when I saw the subject line, "Second Wind." Maybe. Or perhaps I'd always had something to say. I had just been talked over too many times to hear myself. The interview was conducted over the phone. The editor was warm, genuinely curious, and he asked me about the painting, the deep meaning behind it, my personal journey as an artist. I told him the whole story, not mentioning Mason by name. I was not there to expose anyone, just to tell my truth. My painting was dismissed, I said, not because it lacked any value, but because the person it was meant for did not recognize love when it was standing right in front of him. He was quiet for a long moment before he responded, "That is going to resonate with a lot of people." The article was published 2 days later. It exploded. Messages poured in from men all across the country, grandfathers, fathers, even young men who said they saw their own futures in my past, and wanted to change their direction before it was too late. I was invited to speak at a virtual conference for men over 60. A publishing company emailed me about a potential memoir. My email inbox transformed into a garden of courage and confessions from strangers who suddenly felt like brothers. And then came the call from Rome, an art collective that worked with male artists from all over the world, wanted to feature the discarded treasure in a traveling exhibit across South America. They would fly me out and cover absolutely everything. Your story is exactly what this world needs to hear right now, the man on the line said, his Italian accent soft and filled with reverence. After I hung up the phone, I sat still for a very long time. I was not just being seen, I was being heard, and not for being someone's father or grandfather, but for simply being Henry. That night, I walked into my studio and pulled out a fresh, blank canvas. I did not paint Mason. I did not paint the swing, or Max, or the daffodil. I painted a man standing at the very edge of a cliff, his arms stretched out wide, the wind in his hair, looking out over a vast horizon with no trace of fear in his eyes. I titled it Reclaim. I hung it in the hallway, right where the university fund folder used to sit. Because this life, this peace, this power, was the education I had been denied. But I earned it anyway, brushstroke by brushstroke, breath by breath. The world does not always make sense. It doesn't always reward the good people, the kind people, the people who give every piece of themselves to others. I used to believe that it did. I used to believe in some kind of cosmic fairness, in the idea that if you did enough for others, something good would eventually come back to you. But that was not true. At least it had not been for me. Not until now. Rome was like a waking dream. I walked into that gallery on the Grand Plaza, as if I were a different person entirely, as if I had never known what rejection felt like, never known the sting of silence. The city, the lights, the people, all of it was so much more vibrant than I had ever allowed myself to imagine. The artists surrounding me were young, beautiful, and full of energy. They had the kind of futures I used to dream about for myself, a whole lifetime ago, but that was not the life I wanted for myself anymore. I did not need the bright lights to tell me that I was worthy. I was worthy in my own right. And when my painting was finally unveiled to the audience that evening, I watched them stop, fall silent, and stare. Some of them teared up, some stood completely still as if they were trying to absorb every single drop of emotion I had poured into that canvas. I was not just showing them my art, I was showing them I had never known how much it could hurt to finally be seen, to finally be recognized for something I had always given away so freely. The love, the sacrifice, the pieces of myself I had buried so that others could rise high. But when I walked into that gallery, no one expected me to be anything other than myself. Later, as I stood beside my painting, the very same one Mason had mocked, I received more offers, more invitations. A major gallery in Lisbon wanted to feature my work in an upcoming exhibition. A man from an art collection in New Zealand said he wanted to include my pieces in an exhibit on male empowerment. I was invited to speak at more events, to share my story, to share my art. The emails flooded my inbox. The calls came non-stop, and in each one of them I heard something new. Your story matters. Your voice is important. But none of it mattered as much as the moment that came next. One evening after the show in Rome, I walked along the river, the city lights twinkling like fallen stars in the distance. It felt completely surreal, like a dream, one I never thought I would be able to touch. I sat down at a small, quiet cafe, all alone, a small glass of scotch before me, a slice of bread on the table. The world seemed so vast, and yet I no longer felt small within it. I was no longer the quiet man in the background, blending into the shadows of the room. I was Henry Carter, an artist, a creator, a man who finally understood his own intrinsic worth. And in the stillness, as the night settled gently around me, I finally felt a sense of peace. I had not just broken free from Mason, from Lucas, from the world that had always made me feel so invisible. I had broken free from myself, the self that believed he was not enough, the self that had let everyone else take from him. I realized I was not just surviving anymore. I was truly living. When I flew back home to Virginia, everything felt different. The house seemed like a brand new place. Lighter, brighter. I began working on a whole series of new paintings. Each one of them reflected the impact I experienced, the emotional healing. I painted men, not just the soft, nurturing versions of them I had always been. These men were strong, bold, and fierce. Some were standing tall in front of majestic mountains. Others had their arms raised high to the sky, completely unafraid to be seen. I was no longer the man who stayed quiet, who allowed himself to be forgotten. I was not invisible anymore, and neither was my art. But the true gift, the real freedom, it came when I took my rightful place in this world without hesitation, without a single apology. I was finally the man I had always been meant to be. And that was utterly priceless. I had been back from Rome for a few weeks now, and everything had been transformed, not just in the world around me, but deep within myself. The emails still flooded my inbox. The offers continued to come. Art collectors, galleries, press outlets, all of them asking for a piece of me, of my story, of my art. It was surreal, and yet somehow it all felt so profoundly right. But I did not chase the fame. I did not chase the recognition. What mattered to me now was not the applause or the money. It was the quiet, precious moments I got to spend in my own skin, unburdened, unapologetic, and finally at peace. One evening I stood on the porch of my home in Virginia, watching the sun dip gently below the horizon. The landscape stretched out before me, fields, trees, the small creek that ran through the property. The wind carried the clean scent of pine, and the world felt alive. Alive in a way it had not in years. I had no idea where Mason was now. I had stopped asking about him. Lucas had not called. Maybe they were still angry. Maybe they were still upset that I was not the man I used to be. The one who gave everything without a single question, without ever asking for anything in return. But that man was gone, and in his place stood someone stronger. Someone who knew his own worth. I painted every single day now. I did not think about Mason anymore. When I picked up my brush, I thought about what would come next. I painted men with open arms, standing tall, gazing into the vast unknown with no fear in their eyes. And when I finished these paintings, I did not just display them in my studio. I shared them with the entire world. They spoke to the hearts of men who, just like me, had been silenced or overlooked for too long. Men who had lived their lives in the shadows of others, who had been told that their love was not enough. That was the moment I realized what had happened. I had given my heart away for years without ever realizing I was the one who needed to be seen. The most unexpected thing happened that day, when I received a letter in the mail. A small, plain envelope with a simple return address. Mason's name written in that careful, familiar script. My chest tightened as I carefully tore it open. I did not know what to expect. I had not heard from him in months. The letter was short. Pop, I can't undo the hurt I caused you, and I'm not asking for anything. I've been working on myself, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I do want to say I'm sorry. I've been selfish, and I regret how I treated you. I hope one day you'll see me differently. Love, Mason. I read it twice over, the words sinking in slowly. I was not angry, not anymore. I was not even hurt. I was just done. I had let go of the pain, of the expectations, of the years I spent trying to hold on to something that was never meant for me to carry alone. I took the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in the drawer with the university fund folder that had once consumed my entire life. The money was gone, but the immense weight was gone too, and with it any need for validation from anyone but myself. I spent the next few months traveling. I went to South America again, this time to places I had never imagined I would ever visit. I saw new things. I met new people, and I found beauty in absolutely everything. I laughed more, I loved more. I painted with a sense of freedom I had never known before. One afternoon, as I wandered through an art market in Spain, I met a woman, a kind woman. Her name was Victoria. She was an artist as well, older than me, with a gentle soul and a deep appreciation for life's small, quiet moments. We talked for hours about art, about loss, about love. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people talking openly and honestly. We saw each other a few more times. We talked about the lives we had already lived, and the ones we wanted to live now. She was not looking for someone to complete her, and neither was I. But together, we found something that felt real. It was not about filling a void. It was about creating something beautiful from what was already there. And when we parted ways, I did not feel lonely. Not anymore, because I knew, deep down, that I had everything I needed. Not in anyone else, but within myself. Back in Virginia, I stood in front of the canvas I had been working on for months. It was a portrait of a man, older, but with a deep strength in his eyes. His arms stretched wide as if he were embracing the world, fully alive, fully present. There were no restrictions on him. No shame, no guilt, only peace. I titled it Reclaimed, because that is what I had finally found. It was mine, all of it, and it was priceless. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your own story in the comments. Your story matters to us.